Welcome to the Spirit in Mind broadcast with your hosts, Bishop C. Guy Robinson and Dr. Jonathan Shepherd, where we explore faith and mental health perspectives on current affairs. Let's get straight to the Spirit in Mind.
Well, hello and welcome to Spirit in Mind, where we discuss current affairs with faith and mental health perspectives. I'm Bishop Guy Robinson, and I am excited about this opportunity to share with you once again here on Spirit in Mind. And it is always a pleasure to have my colleague and co-host, Dr. Jonathan Shepherd, here with us today. Hello, Dr. Shepherd.
Hey, good afternoon, Bishop, and good afternoon to everyone out there.
Well, hello, everyone. And again, welcome to Spirit in Mind. Please let someone know that it is time for Spirit in Mind. There's several ways you can join us. You can join us. We're streaming live, and you can let someone know that it is on, share it, or share the link, or let someone know that we are streaming live. But we're also here live in the studios of Praise Baltimore 106.1. We want you to join us. Let someone know that it is time for Spirit in Mind. We want you to even feel free to join us in the chat. You can join us in the chat line and be a part of our discussion today, or you can call in right here to the studio at 443-380-2803. That's 443-380-2803. You can be a part of our discussion right here on Spirit in Mind. Dr. Shepherd has some other ways we can stay connected, so stay tuned.
And thank you, Bishop. It's so good to be with everyone here. I was unable to be at the last live show, and I'm just grateful to be alive. And I really want to even say that and really mean that. And thank you for all those who have continued to be a support of those watching us and listening to us on a weekly basis. Literally, it goes without saying that I get messages at least once a week from someone who has been listening to the show. People, Bishop, who I didn't even know listen to the show. And it's just so encouraging. And we want you to know that it benefits us when you let us know. It really does. I even received an email, Bishop, that someone had sent to us in December. And I had a chance to look at our mailbox. So even you could email us at spiritinmindhealth@gmail.com. We don't normally give that out, but yes, you can send us messages and send us testimonies, spiritinmindhealth@gmail.com. I'll put that in the chat. And this one woman, she gave her testimony about how she was listening to the show and how it literally helped her through one of the tensest points in her life. And I am so happy and just so encouraged to know that somehow this show is blessing you. Please let Bishop Robinson know. You can reach out to him at CGR Ministries. He is on Instagram, Facebook. You can also go to his YouTube page, CGR Ministries. You can also see him on Sundays where he is preaching, and he is a pastor of Tabernacle of the Lord Church at 2100 West Baltimore Street, which is in Baltimore, Maryland. And so please go over there and visit. I believe 10 a.m. is the service time, and you can check me out. You can check me out not on Sundays, but any day, Bishop, on my website. And you go to drjonathanshepherd.com, drjonathanshepherd.com, and I'll be able to assist you with direct care services. And Bishop, again, we're seeing so many people reach out who are in need of direct care services. So you can please do that. drjonathanshepherd.com. That's direct care services in the state of Maryland or in the District of Columbia. So we look forward to hearing from you all. And remember, the email again, spiritinmindhealth@gmail.com. I know some people get a little nervous about calling in when we're live on the show, but you can at least email us and let us know that you are being blessed by that, by the show. And we would greatly appreciate hearing from you.
Absolutely, absolutely, because you are a part of the Spirit and Mind experience, and we're so grateful that you are. And again, you can call in, you can use any of the formats you just received to be a part of what we're doing here today. Listen, and we're really today continuing a discussion that has been in process for the last past couple of months, is even taking us into this new year, as we have transitioned into a new year, and even transitioning now into the second month of the new year. We've been talking about dealing with life's transitions. Of course, the hymn writer said, "Time is filled with swift transition." Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, said, "The only constant is change." And the scriptures say, "We shall all be changed." And so we've been talking about how to deal with life's changes and transitions. And this past week, we had a particularly powerful conversation with our guest, and Ms. Annette March Greer, who leads a grief counseling center, an innovative grief counseling center here in the Baltimore, Washington area, multiple locations really, now known as the Roberta's House Grief Counseling Center. And so we were talking last week with her about loss and growth opportunities. Believe it or not, there are growth opportunities even amid the feelings and experiences of loss. We talked about the many ways that we can experience loss, not just the loss of someone, which of course is significant, but not just the loss of significant others, but the loss of a particular way of living, a loss of a sense of normalcy, a loss of a routine, the loss of an idea, of an expectation, the way we expected things to turn out. I sit here now, we talk about current affairs. I'm a Baltimorean. And this time last week, I was expecting to get ready for Super Bowl celebrations. And so the way that game turned out was not only a sports loss, but it was a psychological loss. You could feel the grief in the city, really, as people were disappointed. It's a collective feeling of loss because the experience, as we've talked about here on Spirit and Mind before, the experience did not meet the expectation. And whenever there's a disconnect between an expectation and an experience, we feel pain from the loss of the expectation. So loss, that's the point, that loss comes in many forms. If you ever found yourself saying, "I expected to be at this place by now," and then you're in a different place, then you've experienced a form of loss. But the good news, the gospel of it, is that there are growth opportunities even as we experience loss. So Ms. March Greer helped us to understand that, go through it, acknowledge it. Acceptance doesn't mean approval. It doesn't mean I wish it had turned out this way. It can say it did not turn out the way I wanted, but I accept it and I face it and I'm seeking the tools. We talked about maladaptive strategies and healthy ways of dealing with the loss. And when we find those healthy ways, the hope of it is that there are growth opportunities on the other side of that lost journey, or as a part of that lost journey, even. Jesus put it this way, and then we'll move forward. In John 12, he said, "Except the seed go into the ground and die, it cannot bring forth fruit. But if it does go into the ground and die, it can bring forth much fruit," because there's growth opportunity. For us as Christians, the whole concept of our salvation is based on the fact that whereas in the loss led to literally eternal life for you and I, because there are growth opportunities even in the midst of the loss. I've quit with this, which I know the hymn writer, the songwriter used to say, "There's a bright side somewhere." Don't rest until you find it. Don't rest in the darkness. Don't rest in it. We talked about that. We'll move that darkness, according to Genesis, is really a prelude to light. That it doesn't begin with light, but light, actually, experience actually begins in darkness and ends in light. which is why our Hebrew brothers and sisters of our Judeo-Christian faith begin a new day at sundown, because a new day actually begins in darkness, and the evening and the morning, or the first day is what the scriptures say. Don't miss the order. And the evening and the morning, because a new day actually begins in darkness and ends in light. We do the exact opposite, that our day begins in light and ends in darkness. But the scriptures suggest that our day begins in darkness, and God sees darkness as a creative opportunity to bring forth light. Thus, the scripture says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Because if we can endure the dark season, on the other side of it, there's daylight, because our story doesn't end in darkness. It ends in light and growth and hope and health. That pretty much sums up what we talked about last week. Dr. Shepherd, please take us further from here.
Wow, that was powerful, Bishop. That was awesome. And I tell you this, I needed to hear that, because many of us forget that newness begins in darkness. And so for those of you all out there who have had some dark seasons, especially since 2024 began, and I'm there with you, 2024 has began very rocky year for me, probably one of the worst months I've had in over 10 some years, Bishop. It has been dark. And one of the things that I can attribute my ability to even be here each week and still be able to stand and sit before you all and declare I have strength is because of my faith. And so thank you for reminding me that there must be something new. There must be something big on the other end. And I do know that there's a newness that is beginning, because it is quite dark right now. And honestly, that really does tie into, as I was sharing with Bishop, what I've been meditating on this week as we are in our Living in the New Place series. We are transitioning, and now we find ourselves in a new place. And, we talked about how to have rest and how to be patient once you arrive to a new place, because many of us, as we go through transitions, we find ourselves worn out. We find ourselves exhausted because of the day, or really the nighttime, the dark season. Let me continue on that train. As you're in transition, many of us will find ourselves weary as we've gone through that. But what I want to share with you all today and lift up, and one of the things that has found such a interest in my life right now is that we can go through transitions and find ourselves in a new place and not even know. It's amazing that changes are occurring all around us, and we don't even understand or recognize or acknowledge that these changes are happening until sometimes it's too late. Sometimes you wake up and you say, wow, I didn't even know that this had even happened. Just little subtle changes. I'll just use, for example, I've had an incident even within my own home where I had to remodel my whole bathroom because there were subtle changes of where water was seeping in the tiles, and it was growing mold, and I did not know it, Bishop. And anybody out there who has had an experience where you have mold in your house, you know that is not safe. But that didn't just happen overnight. It happened because there was little small pieces of water. Well, I won't say droplets of water. Water's not pieces, but droplets of water that was seeping in with moisture. And during that period of really not knowing, not understanding what was happening until it was too late. And I didn't know until it was too late. And I started saying, wait a minute, something doesn't look right around my bathroom. And so I said, let me investigate. What is that? What is going on here? And sure enough, when we investigated, we pulled back, realized that I had a mold problem. Now, why does that translate to what we're talking about here? Is because many of us are going through transitions, and a lot of us don't like transitions. But what I'm understanding is that we can be going through something and it not be something or a transition that really has hit us hard, It could be, again, due to loss, due to grief and things like that, where we think that we're doing okay. We think that we're managing it. We think that we're accepting what God has allowed to happen. And then one day, bam, something happens. And it could be just so small where you see something that reminds you of that loss. Uh, we saw the Ravens lose. And, I could be walking down the street and I see the Ravens flag. And if I really are dedicated to it, Bishop, that could just, it could send me over the edge. Like, what happened? Like, what was wrong? Why did they keep on with the running game? And that's what happens. I know that sounds a little bit humorous, but it's true. That's exactly what's happening in our minds when we do not allow for ourselves to understand the changes that are happening. And so it's a term that's called inattentional blindness. Inattentional blindness or change blindness. Let me tell you, this thing has really struck me this week as I am studying in a class at my church that's called Developing a Focused Walk. And I want to share that with you because as we go through these transitions and as we find ourselves in a new place, some of us are waking up in a new place and didn't realize we were there. And we didn't realize we were there. We didn't want to be there. We didn't put ourselves there. And so it's a little slight difference, if I may use that, of a road that we've been on lately. But I had to address it while we're still here because I can feel that someone is saying, Shepherd, I've gone through the transition. I'm in this new place, but it's not where I thought I was going to be. And sometimes it's because we didn't sit down and recognize the signs of what was happening all around us. I'm in here. I don't know if you've ever been back to a city where you grew up and then you visit there maybe every 4 or 5 years and you come back and you're like, wait a minute, what happened? The various things that I was used to being there are no longer there. And there was just these subtle changes that were happening within the landscape of that environment. And before you know it, you look up and say, wow, everything has changed. That's happened in DC, where I work at now in Northeast. If you looked at that place 5 years ago and look at it now, you'd be like, that's not the same place, Dr. Shepherd. But these are subtle changes that were happening day by day. And then before you realize it, like, wow, everything has changed. And so I want to just leave that with you all today. I see some people have already commented in the live stream. We're going to get to those questions, but that's just where I am today, Bishop. I don't know if you have any additional comments on that, but that's what's been hitting me.
Yes. Really describing, the different types of changes in life, in organizations, in family structures, and some of those types that we talk about in organizational development and change and group dynamics are radical changes, incremental changes, and then strategic changes. Life has all kinds of, various assortments of all of those. Radical change, things that come upon us suddenly and often unexpectedly. That's what the hymn writer was referring to. And he said, time is filled with swift transitions. Didn't really see this coming. One phone call, and my life has changed radically. One message, one incident changed my life radically. And then there's incremental change. Dr. Shepherd talked about where things can be changing little by little. And sometimes we're not even aware of it because the changes, they can be changes for the better. They can be changes for the worse. The Bible speaks about the little foxes that destroy the vine. It's just little by little eating away at us and changing our mood, changing our worldview, changing our attitude, changing our cognitive emotional states. So that's incremental change. That can be positive and transformational, or it can be not so positive. But then there's strategic change when we make intentional efforts, and that's sort of like the opposite, but of the unconscious changes that happens, when we kind of try to deal with it. But whenever there's change, there can be this feeling of loss. And I want to stay because we've been referencing that. That's a powerful analogy, because again, we talk about current affairs. You see a flag, or you see a Ravens flag or something, and you go through that. I want to use that sports analogy to show how we can be sometimes going through grief changes and not even know it. You could look at basically any social media stream page now and see it. When we go through grief, you can see right now, you can see the anger. You can see the denial. I can't believe this happened. You can see the reaction that is usually emotionally driven at first, where we look for meaning. Why did this happen? And so I hope you hear me. It's a sports analogy, but if you're going through this in other ways, we start looking for the whys. Why did the disappointment happen? Was it the coaching? Was it the game plan? Was it a conspiracy? Was it this? Was it Taylor Swift? You start going, you know what I mean? You start going through all of the conspiratorial ideas and all of the other possibilities because you're just kind of trying to come up with a why. Because Friedrich Nietzsche said, "He that has a why can endure anyhow." So I'm looking for a purpose to describe this process. And so these are signs of grief. And then eventually, sometimes when that anger is still really raw, you look for scapegoats. It's this person. It was the coach. It was the quarterback. It was this play. It was the referee. You start looking for it, and everybody starts looking for a scapegoat. The scapegoat is the person who bears the weight of the whole thing for everybody. And so the scapegoating is a part of what we look for. Usually that's the leader. But it's a team effort, really, and it takes a whole team. And chaos theory, the reason of chaos theory says that there can't be just one cause to an undesirable outcome, but there are multiple contributing factors. Like when you see a storm, it's not just one thing, it's several fronts that have to come together in a particular way to produce a particular outcome. But we like to be reductionist and find the scapegoat and say that it's one thing, when really chaos theory says that it's multiple things. And so, but when we go through this, we possibly, I'm talking about sports, but I'm also talking about other grief reactions that we have. And if any of this is relating to any of us, you might just be going through a grieving process. And we want to encourage you to say that there's growth on the other side. And so we just talked about how changes can be happening and we not know it. So I'm just kind of trying to identify some of the ways by using a current event. Dr. Shepherd.
Yeah, and Bishop, if you stay there, we think about the plays that were happening throughout that game as I watched it so intently. And it was, if we who were watching the game, we recognized what was happening to the Ravens, but we were saying, well, don't they see what's happening? Don't they see that they stopped running the ball? And you hear the commentators, you hear the commentators saying this and that, but it really is a wonderful analogy because we're saying we see what's happening, but it's like they don't. And so it's like, is that a form of unintentional blindness? I don't know. But I will say this, is that it's different from when you're on the sidelines and when you're in the game.
Yes.
And so it's a whole different perspective. A lot of times we have a lot of people sit on the sidelines and, we look and we say, well, how did they end up over there? I can see that they were going to end up in that new place. And even though that new place, you want to be over there, well, how did they get to there? How did they end up over there? So, yeah, Bishop, I hear you on that. That begs the difference.
That has several, what you said is powerful because your perspective. So listen, we're talking about a game, but we're talking about more than a game at the same time. So, if you're watching and when we're watching, watching on the big screen TV like I was, or high up, lifted up in the stadium, you have this macro view.
Right.
You see everything. You see this big picture. But if you're actually down there on the sideline, the image looks different. And so you can find yourself upset because you're going, couldn't they see it? And that can be a part of the grieving process, particularly for the survivor or the caregiver, that you can say, I could see you if you had just made some behavioral modifications, some behavioral changes. I could see you going in this direction. You weren't taking care of yourself. I was trying to get you to see. All of those can be part of the grieving process. And so I'm grieving, but I'm also kind of angry because I was trying to tell you that you needed to make these lifestyle behavioral changes. I could see from the big screen where this was headed. And so now I have to process this because I feel as if I was trying, but I feel unheard. And so all of these, so we're talking about a game. but we're also talking about more than the game.
Right.
And so, and again, there's hope and there's things we can learn and we can live with. Believe it or not, we'll be talking about last week differently in 6 months than we are
Yep.
talking about it right now.
Absolutely. And thank God we have a God who can see the back row and still get down with us at the bike row.
Yeah, absolutely.
And still help us out. I'll be honest with you, that is a good attribute of leaders who are able to see beyond just the macro and be able to help those people. Leaders who always stay in the weeds, they tend to get bogged down and overwhelmed. Or leaders who always stay macro, they tend to miss out on some things. But you got to be able to have a healthy balance. And thank you for that, Bishop. I just want to acknowledge one of the ministers from your church, Minister Rebecca, who's been on here, and just how
Yes.
she shares just some of her personal stories about having a son.
Yeah.
The Lord, she just stated, but how through her faith and how she's been able to maintain her sanity and sobriety as she is. So thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge that, Mr. Rebecca, because that takes courage to be able to share that. And so we just thank you for that. I see some other ones on here who have commented, and thank you again for that. We really appreciate your ability to share with us. We're staying with this, living in a new place, living in a new place. And it's not just always about the excitement and having new things and new fixtures and all that type of stuff. We want to make sure that we want to understand how did we get here and what some of the issues and some of the pitfalls that may happen once we get transition and get new. And then we also will talk about the good things. We want to keep a healthy balance here. Bishop, I know we're almost out of time, so I'm going to stop there.
Listen, we hope that you can help. Thank you, Minister Rebecca. She said something powerful. People sometimes blame God. Yeah, that's scriptural. We got to move. But Elizabeth, when she ran, reminded of Mary and Martha, rather. Martha ran up on Jesus and said, "If you had been here." And so, but listen, God always has another move, and that's where we want to leave you with that. God, it says, is going to get the glory because there are growth opportunities even in the losses of life. We're not glorifying loss, but we've learned to glory in our troubles. There's a difference between glorying troubles and glorying in our troubles. And so we pray that you will be able to glory in your troubles. Listen, if we've been a blessing to you, if this has been helpful to you, that's what we're here for. And we want to encourage you to let someone know that we're here every Saturday at 1 p.m. And by the grace of God, we look forward to seeing you next time right here on Spirit in Mind.